I still remember the day with a painful clarity, the day when, in one breath, my world shattered. My wife, with tears in her eyes and a trembling smile, announced she was leaving me for a wealthy investor. Her words, meant to sound glamorous and assuring, cut through me like shattered glass. In that moment, every promise we'd ever shared, every quiet hope for our future, crumbled into dust. I sat there, numb and incredulous as the reality sank in. The man she adored was supposed to be rich, influential, a ticket to a life of luxury. But deep down, a gnawing doubt stirred, whispering that something wasn't right. I spent that night in a daze, my mind racing through every memory, our first date, the long conversations, the dreams we once wove together. How had everything come to this? I recalled her subtle hints of discontent, the furtive glances when she spoke of big money, yet I had dismissed them as mere ambition. The shock was compounded by the fact that she had chosen to leave in secret, without any real explanation, leaving me with a silence that screamed louder than any argument ever could. In the days that followed, I desperately tried to piece together the fragments of my broken heart. I confronted mutual friends, scoured our old messages, and even revisited the places where we had once laughed and planned our future. Every step of the way, I found myself haunted by questions. Who was this wealthy investor she spoke of? Had he truly offered her the promise of a better life? And most agonizingly, did I ever really know what was behind her eyes when she said those words? At first, I tried to convince myself that it was all a mistake, a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with a conversation, a heartfelt apology. But as days turned into weeks and she remained distant, I slowly came to the painful realization that she was determined to move on. The man she had chosen to be with, this so-called investor, was cast in a halo of wealth and opportunity, a stark contrast to my own modest, hard-earned existence. I was left alone with my thoughts, grappling with the bitter irony that the very person who had once promised to love and cherish me now had her sights set on a man whose wealth was supposed to guarantee her happiness. In the midst of my despair, I began to notice small inconsistencies in the story she had spun. Whispers among friends and subtle hints in her social media posts made me wonder if everything was as it seemed. I started hearing that the investor, heralded as a titan of finance, was evasive about details. His background shrouded in mystery, his business ventures too good to be true. The more I listened, the more a sinking feeling took hold in my gut. I wasn't ready to believe that the man she'd left me for could be a fraud, but the whispers of doubt refused to be silenced. Haunted by these suspicions, I decided to retrace her steps. I spent countless nights poring over online profiles, financial news, and even obscure forums where whispers of scams and fraudulent investments circulated. Every piece of the puzzle that I uncovered painted a picture of a man who was far from the wealthy savior my wife had described. It seemed that behind the facade of affluence and charm, there lay a trail of dubious deals, shady partnerships, and promises that were never kept. Yet, I had no concrete proof, only the growing chorus of rumors and my own gnawing intuition. At work, my focus wavered as the stress of the situation took its toll. The man I once was, a diligent, determined professional, was slowly being replaced by someone consumed with the need for answers and a desperate need for closure. I began staying late at the office, burying myself in projects in an attempt to distract from the unraveling of my personal life. Yet, every night as I sat alone in the darkened conference room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a nightmare from which I might never awake. I reached out to a trusted friend, someone who had known both my wife and me for years, and hesitantly asked for his perspective. Over coffee in a quiet diner, he revealed that there had been murmurs for months about the investor's questionable reputation. People say he's a scam artist, he confided, his eyes filled with concern. They warn women not to get involved with him because he's all talk and no substance. His words struck me hard. Each syllable confirmed the suspicions that had been growing inside me. I began to wonder if my wife had been duped, if the promise of wealth had blinded her to the truth. As I struggled with these revelations, a storm of emotions raged within me, hurt, anger, confusion, and a twisted sense of vindication. I wanted to reach out to her, to demand the truth and to understand why she had chosen someone who was, by all accounts, a con man. But even as I longed for confrontation, I realized that my immediate focus needed to be on rebuilding my own life. I couldn't allow the betrayal to consume me. I had to channel that energy into discovering my own worth and reclaiming the dignity that had been so callously stripped away. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every suspicious detail, every internal conflict, in a journal that became both my confessor and my roadmap for healing. I wrote about the nights I spent wide awake, battling the haunting questions that plagued my mind. I recounted the feeling of betrayal as if it were a tangible weight pressing down on me, and slowly I began to see that each word I wrote was a step toward reclaiming my identity. I also immersed myself in self-improvement, rediscovering old hobbies and even picking up new ones that brought me solace. I took up long-distance running to clear my mind, the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement serving as a meditation that helped expel the dark thoughts. I enrolled in a photography class, where the act of capturing fleeting moments of beauty reminded me that there was still hope in the world, a world that wasn't defined solely by heartbreak and deception. Through these pursuits, I slowly began to rebuild not only my self-esteem but also the realization that my life was mine to reclaim, regardless of the choices of others. As the weeks passed, I found that my inner turmoil was gradually giving way to a fierce determination. I decided that if my suspicions about the investor were true, then exposing the truth might not only free my wife from a terrible mistake but also allow me to move forward with a clearer sense of purpose. I began discreetly gathering information, talking to acquaintances, and following leads that could shed light on the investor's real identity. Every new piece of evidence, no matter how small, reinforced the idea that she had been misled, that the wealthy investor was nothing more than a scam artist cloaked in false promises. In the midst of all this, I couldn't help but feel a bitter irony. The man I once trusted, the person I had built my life with, had chosen to leave me for someone who turned out to be a fraud. And now, as I sat in the quiet solitude of my study, I realized that her decision, however misguided, had set me on a path of self-discovery and empowerment. I was no longer defined by the love I had lost, but by the strength I had found in the aftermath. Every sleepless night, every tear shed in despair, was slowly transforming into a testament to my resilience, a promise that I would emerge from this ordeal stronger, wiser, and more self-assured than ever before. This is the beginning of a long and challenging journey, a journey of uncovering hidden truths, of reconciling the pain of betrayal, and of rediscovering the inherent worth that had been overshadowed by deceit. As I gather the scattered pieces of my shattered heart, I'm determined to not only understand the full extent of the deception that had ensnared my wife but also to rebuild a life that is richer and more fulfilling than I ever imagined possible. In the coming days, I will confront the unsettling reality of the investor's scam, share my discoveries, and continue to forge my own path, no longer shackled by the lies of the past. I discovered the truth with a gut-wrenching mix of disbelief and vindication. Late one stormy night, while sifting through scraps of digital clues and hushed whispers, I uncovered that the wealthy investor was nothing more than a con man. The evidence unfolded before me like a twisted tale. Vague business addresses, dodgy email accounts, and testimonials from scorned victims who'd been duped out of their savings. Every revelation struck me like lightning, electrifying my determination to expose the sham. My heart pounded with both sorrow for the woman I once loved and fierce resolve to reclaim my dignity. I knew then that my journey toward truth and self-respect had only just begun. Over the next few weeks, I dedicated myself to a covert investigation. I revisited old conversations, re-examined the promises that had lured her away from me, and scoured every corner of the internet for details about the investor's real identity. Late nights became my routine, the dim glow of my computer screen reflecting the intensity of my pursuit. I discovered that he had a history of similar scams, women who were promised lavish lifestyles and then left with empty bank accounts and shattered dreams. The more I delved into his murky past, the more a bitter satisfaction took root in me. I wasn't just fighting for my own pride anymore, I was determined to save her from a fate she might never fully comprehend. At work, I found solace in channeling my anger and heartbreak into productivity. My colleagues noticed a new fire in my eyes, a focused intensity that made every task feel like a step toward liberation. I took on extra responsibilities, spearheaded innovative projects, and quietly began to position myself as someone not to be underestimated. Every success in the boardroom was a counterpunch to the pain I'd endured, a reaffirmation that I was capable of rising above betrayal. I even began to mentor a few junior staff, sharing with them the lessons of resilience and the importance of trusting one's instincts, even when the world seems intent on tearing you down. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake the feeling that my wife's choice had been a tragic misstep, a decision born out of misplaced trust and the lure of false promises. I tried reaching out to mutual friends for their perspective, and their hushed confessions confirmed my worst fears. She had been seduced by the allure of quick riches and an extravagant lifestyle, completely oblivious to the warning signs that now, in hindsight, appear glaringly obvious. Their words pained me, yet they also fueled my resolve. I wasn't willing to let her be another victim of this scammer's deceit. I began drafting anonymous messages for online forums and support groups, warning others about the investor's predatory tactics. Each post was a small act of retribution, a way to channel my hurt into protecting others from the same fate. Emotionally, I felt a turbulent mix of regret and liberation. There were nights when I longed to confront her directly, to demand answers and force her to see the reality behind the facade. But even as that urge burned within me, I recognized that true strength lay in restraint and self-preservation. I wasn't seeking a dramatic showdown, I was carving a quiet path to reclaim my life. I started therapy, where I slowly untangled the knot of emotions, betrayal, love, anger, and hope, that had defined the months since she left. My therapist helped me see that, while her choices had caused deep wounds, they didn't have to dictate the future I was building. Instead, they could serve as catalysts for personal growth and self-empowerment. One chilly evening, while reviewing some newly discovered documents online, I received a call from an old acquaintance who had once worked with her. With a hesitant voice, he confirmed that the investor had a dubious track record, multiple failed ventures, legal battles, and a string of broken promises. His admission was a turning point. I thanked him profusely, feeling that piece of the puzzle finally clicked into place. This information wasn't just proof of the scam, it was a lifeline to rescue my wife from a life that was built on lies. Though I still felt a pang of sorrow for what we had lost, I couldn't help but feel that this revelation would ultimately set both of us free, her from the clutches of deceit, and me from the lingering shackles of betrayal. Armed with evidence and a newfound clarity, I began to quietly compile a dossier on the scammer. I saved emails, screenshots, and even audio recordings from online interviews with his previous victims. Every piece of evidence was a brick in the foundation of a case that I hoped would expose him once and for all. I reached out to a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud, and together we discussed the possibilities of taking legal action. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself, it was about justice and ensuring that no one else would be duped by his silver-tongued promises. Despite the overwhelming focus on gathering proof, I continued to nurture my own recovery. I made a point to celebrate small victories, like completing a grueling project at work or simply having a good day without the constant shadow of doubt. I reconnected with friends and family, those who had always been there for me, and their unwavering support became my anchor. Their encouragement reminded me that my worth was not defined by one person's betrayal, but by the collective strength of those who believed in me. I began to smile more, laugh more, and even plan for a future that no longer revolved around the pain of the past. As the weeks turned into a month, the picture of the scammer grew clearer, and his empire of lies began to unravel. My investigation revealed that he had been using elaborate marketing schemes to lure in unsuspecting partners with promises of wealth and prestige. In reality, his ventures were nothing more than elaborate hoaxes, designed to enrich himself at the expense of the desperate. The more I uncovered, the more I was determined to expose him. I started reaching out to online communities of those affected by financial scams, sharing the evidence I'd gathered in a careful, anonymous manner. Each post was a cathartic release, a way to reclaim control over a narrative that had once been dictated by deceit and manipulation. One particular breakthrough came when I discovered a forum thread where several women recounted their experiences with this investor. Their stories, though varied in details, painted a consistent picture of a man who promised everything but delivered nothing. Reading their words, I felt a surge of solidarity and a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't alone in this fight. Countless others had been scarred by his con artistry, and together our voices could bring him to justice. This collective awareness sparked a small movement online. People sharing tips, warnings, and even forming support groups for those affected. It was a digital uprising against a scam that had ruined lives, and I was proud to be a part of it, contributing in my own quiet way. Yet, as I delved deeper into the investigation, I couldn't help but reflect on the personal cost of it all. The revelation that the wealthy investor was a fraud was bittersweet. I felt a pang of sadness for my wife. Had she truly been so blinded by the allure of false promises that she couldn't see the truth? The thought haunted me even as I focused on my mission. I wanted to help her see the reality, to free her from the trap of a man who had manipulated her dreams. But I also knew that some truths are too painful to confront directly. I wrestled with the idea of reaching out to her, of sharing my findings and offering a lifeline, but I ultimately decided that my primary responsibility was to myself and to the others who had been duped. My fight was not just about my own hurt, it was about protecting others from a similar fate. Throughout this process, I found solace in writing. My journal became a refuge where I could pour out the raw, unfiltered emotions that surged through me each day. I wrote about the nights filled with restless anxiety, the moments of triumph when a new piece of evidence confirmed my suspicions, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice might one day prevail. The act of writing transformed my grief and anger into something constructive, a record of my resilience that I hoped would inspire others to fight back against deceit. In every conversation, every sleepless night spent gathering evidence, I felt a growing clarity. I began to see that the betrayal, as painful as it was, had forced me to grow in ways I never anticipated. I was no longer the man who had been crushed by hurtful words and broken promises. I had become a warrior of truth, armed with knowledge and fueled by the desire to ensure that others would not suffer the same fate. The investor scam was unraveling, and with each new revelation, I felt a step closer to not only exposing his fraud but also reclaiming my own narrative, a narrative that was defined by courage, determination, and an unshakable belief in the power of truth. I still recall the moment when everything finally fell into place, a turning point that fused the pain of betrayal with the thrill of reclaiming my destiny. It was a brisk winter morning, the kind when the air bites and the sky is a sharp, clear blue, and I found myself standing in the midst of a crowded press conference, my heart pounding not with anger, but with a quiet, resolute pride. Today I was here not only to expose the scammer who had ruined so many lives, including, indirectly, my own, but also to announce that I had taken decisive legal action that would put an end to his fraudulent empire once and for all. In that moment, as I faced a room filled with reporters and industry experts, I realized that my journey from heartbreak to vindication had come full circle. 4 months, I had wrestled with the shock and the sting of my wife's departure, her decision to leave me for a man who, by all appearances, promised wealth and security. I had watched, almost in slow motion, as my life unraveled. Endless nights spent scouring online forums, piecing together clues that revealed the investor's true identity, and an internal struggle between longing for what once was and forging a future defined solely by my own worth. The evidence I gathered, the testimonials from others scammed by this con man, all led to an inescapable truth. He was nothing more than a fraud, a master manipulator with no substance behind his lavish promises. I had then reached out to a seasoned lawyer, someone with a reputation for taking on financial fraud, and together we built a case that was as robust as it was damning. Every email, every recorded conversation, every financial statement became part of the tapestry of evidence that would ultimately bring him down. The legal process was grueling and fraught with setbacks. There were moments when the weight of doubt almost overwhelmed me. But with every hurdle, I recalled the bitter taste of betrayal and found the strength to press on. I wasn't doing this solely for myself. I was fighting for all those who had been misled, for every shattered dream caused by his deceit. In the courtroom, I remember sitting among the other victims, each of us a silent witness to the devastation wrought by his lies. The trial was intense. Days stretched into weeks as witnesses recounted their painful experiences, and experts laid bare the intricacies of his fraudulent schemes. I spoke out about how my life had been turned upside down by his presence. A life where my wife's blind pursuit of a fabricated future had cost me not only my heart but also the trust one once held dear. Standing there, I felt a catharsis that I had long yearned for. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, a measure of justice. Outside the courtroom, the world began to shift in ways I hadn't dared to hope for. The scammer's reputation was in ruins, his empire crumbling under the weight of incontrovertible evidence. Media outlets that once whispered about his supposed wealth now blasted headlines exposing his deceit. Social media was alight with messages of support and solidarity from those who had once been duped by his false promises. I was inundated with thank you notes and messages from strangers who told me that my determination had saved them from further loss. It was an unexpected vindication, a confirmation that the pain I had endured was not in vain, but the fuel that had ignited a movement of accountability. As the verdict was read in the courtroom, a decisive ruling that ordered restitution to all the defrauded victims, I felt an overwhelming sense of release. In that moment, every tear shed, every sleepless night, every pang of betrayal dissolved into the realization that I had not only reclaimed my life, but I had also helped to right a wrong that had hurt so many. I stepped out of the courthouse into the crisp winter air with a lightness in my heart. I was free from the shadows of that painful past, free to rebuild a future that was solely my own. The journey had been long and arduous, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to live a life defined by truth and integrity. In the months that followed the trial, life began to heal in unexpected ways. My wife, once blinded by the allure of a false promise, eventually came to terms with the fallout of her choices. I received a brief message from her, a note of regret, a quiet apology, and an acknowledgement that she had been wrong. I didn't respond with bitterness. Instead, I chose to forgive not because I forgot the pain, but because I recognized that forgiveness was the key to freeing myself from the past. I realized that our lives had diverged long ago, and that my path was now lit by the lessons I had learned from that betrayal. I continued to focus on my own growth, on building relationships based on honesty and mutual respect, and on pursuing the passions that had once been buried under the weight of heartbreak. Professionally, my reputation as a resilient entrepreneur and a crusader for justice grew. I was invited to speak at conferences, sharing my story of overcoming betrayal and exposing financial fraud. I mentored aspiring business owners, encouraging them to trust in their own vision and to never let anyone's deception define their worth. I began writing a book about my experiences, a raw, unfiltered account of my journey from heartbreak to vindication, aimed at inspiring others who might be facing similar challenges. Every word I penned was a tribute to the strength of the human spirit, a reminder that even the darkest moments can be transformed into the light of a new beginning. There were still quiet moments of introspection, nights when I would sit by the window of my apartment, gazing out at the city lights, and think about the twists of fate that had led me to this point. I recalled the laughter at that family gathering, the mocking dismissal of my humble job, and the cold, calculated way in which my wife had abandoned me for a supposed wealthy investor. And now, in the glow of hard-won justice and personal triumph, I felt no bitterness, only a profound gratitude for the journey that had shaped me. I had learned that true empowerment comes from within, that the wounds of betrayal can become the foundation for strength, and that every ending is merely the start of a new, extraordinary chapter. Looking back, I see that my life has been a series of unpredictable twists and turns, each one an opportunity to redefine who I was and who I aspired to be. The scammer, the betrayal, the painful legal battle, all of it has led me to a place where I am in complete control of my narrative. I am no longer defined by someone else's lies or by the scars of my past. I am defined by the choices I make every day, by the resilience I cultivate, and by the unwavering belief that my worth is inherent and unassailable. Today, as I prepare to embark on new ventures, I carry with me the quiet, unyielding strength of a man who has turned pain into purpose. I continue to live my life with passion, integrity, and a deep commitment to justice, not just for myself but for all those who have been wronged by deceit and exploitation. My journey is far from over. It is an evolving story of growth, empowerment, and the relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. This is my story, a journey from heartbreak to vindication, from betrayal to empowerment, and from being a victim of deceit to a champion of truth. It is a testament to the indomitable power of the human spirit, a reminder that no matter how dark the path, there is always a way to rise, to reclaim your identity, and to build a future that shines with the promise of hope and renewal. As I step forward into this bright new chapter, I do so with the unshakable belief that every challenge faced and every wound endured has only made me stronger. And while the scars of the past may forever mark my journey, they serve as powerful symbols of the resilience and courage that have defined my transformation. I stand today not as a man broken by betrayal, but as a living, breathing testament to the truth that our worth is determined by the strength we muster in the face of adversity. I have learned that forgiveness is not about forgetting, but about releasing the burden of bitterness, and that true success lies in the ability to transform every setback into a stepping stone toward a brighter, more fulfilling future. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a spirit emboldened by every hard-won lesson, I move forward, ready to write the next extraordinary chapter of my life.